We're good.
I don't want to belly wash it, but I think we need a little running.
We're good here.
All right, we good? All right. Time is 6:31. We'll call this meeting to order. Mr. Hodge, you will lead us in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the day. We thank you for allowing us to meet this evening to God and discuss matters related to the future of our city. Lord, I pray for decisions that are made tonight. I pray for our state and federal leaders as they continue to walk our country through unprecedented times. I thank you for first responders, military, that are here and abroad. I thank you for fire and police as they service day in and day out. I thank you for protecting them and keeping them. Well, I just lift up that even family, our community lost a long time leader this week, and I pray for comfort and peace during their time of loss. And Lord, again, I just ask you to guide our decisions in Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
Mr. Hodge, will you lead us in
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
There you go. All right. As I say in every meeting, the rules of the coroner are in effect. Next thing up will be citizens' comments. Do you have any issues?
Hi, Joe. Ryan, are you here?
You stand there, you sit there, and quiet.
If Ryan has a couple of comments he'd like to make.
Yes, good evening. Ryan Roseborough with AGCM Project Management. Good to see everybody tonight. I just wanted to update y'all on a couple of quick things regarding progress since the last City Council meeting. If you recall, at the last City Council meeting, the City Council approved the ranking of... Than I said? Sorry about that. Anyway, at the last City Council meeting, the rankings were approved for the design build contractors for a potential new fire station. So just wanted to update you on progress. We're moving along with negotiations. Mr. Holla has reviewed an initial draft contract from the design build team, and we're in the process now of moving forward with negotiating fees to hopefully still with the intent of coming back to you September 8th with a contract in hand for City Council approval to move forward with that station. Assuming that we maintain that timeline, we would envision big picture, and at the next council meeting, we'll be bringing you for approval an actual strawman schedule that will change as we go through the process, but something high level to say this is the goal. But based on that schedule right now, December of 2021 is when we're hoping, Merry Christmas, you'll be able to move into your new station. So from a high level, that's where we stand today, and I just wanted to present you with that brief update. So thank you. Appreciate it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Show that unanimous. All right, we'll move on to the next item, 6.1, discussion and action regarding the request of Leonard Raymond Larson for approval of a final plat on 2-acre tract of land located at 1635 and 1139. My understanding is Mr. Coker is going to give us a report. Mr. Coker?
Yes, sir. Mike Coker, representing the city. The applicant in this case is Steve Bias, but he's no longer the property owner. Were you getting feedback?
No.
At any rate, he sold it to Mr. Larson. But Mr. Bias has been designated officially by Mr. Larson as his representative because it's a little different than we've had in the past. Mr. Bias owned 10.8 acres on 1139. He sold 8.8 acres to the Alexanders. But the entire width of that 10.8 acres on 1139 was only 332 feet. Our zoning ordinance for that zoning district 2.5 requires 300 linear feet of frontage on the street in order for you to have a lot. This is probably my person. At any rate, so and that zoning district also requires a 2.5 acre lot size. So Mr. Bias petitioned the Board of Adjustment to reduce the size of the remaining lot from 2.5 acres to 2 acres, and the board approved that request. Then he also asked the board to reduce the required frontage on a public way from 300 feet to 1/2 of the distance that he actually had, which was 169 feet, leaving 169 feet for the Alexanders to front and 169 feet for Mr. Leonard to front on 1139. The board also approved that request. So the Board of Adjustment has the authority in certain cases to grant variances to the zoning ordinance, which they did. I don't get it. I get to make a recommendation. They do what they want to do. It doesn't come to you. If anybody appeals that, it goes to court. So the only condition that the Board of Adjustment made on Mr. Bias's approval of the 2-acre lot with 169 feet of frontage was that he submit an application for a final plat in order to create a building site. Therefore, that's why we're here today. Aside from the fact that the Board of Adjustment has granted the 2 variances, the reduction in the size from 2.5 to 2 acres, and the reduction in the frontage requirement from 300 to 169 feet, this application, which has been recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission, meets all the requirements of the city subdivision regulations. And Mr. Mayor, I'm glad to answer any questions that the council might have. Yes, sir. No, they were not unanimous. There was the chair of the board voted in opposition to the majority. There are 5 members on the board, 4 said yes, 1 said no. So a majority in this case of 4 is required to grant the variance, and 4 granted the variance in both cases.
I'll entertain a motion for approval of final plat on the 2-acre tract of land located at 1625 FM 1139.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the plat of land as written on 1625 FM 1139.
I've got a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion, council? If not, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Show that unanimous. All right, we'll move on to 6.2, consider approval of a memorandum of understanding between the city of McLendon-Chisholm and Terrell for the purpose of enabling McLendon-Chisholm to become a water retailer and wastewater provider and other mutual benefits for both cities.
Yes, sir. This item was on the executive session at the last meeting, and for the benefit of the public, we're considering it tonight. I'd like to kind of give a little bit of a history as to how we got here. So I'd like to explain a little bit about what an MOU is and why an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with Terrell, is proposed at this time. So to begin, a Memorandum of Understanding is an informal statement of what 2 or more parties have agreed to or hope to accomplish. It usually states the purpose and the responsibilities of the parties involved, and it's not a contract, and it is not legally binding. So it summarizes in writing the intentions of the parties and describes what the parties understand is expected of one another. It's a written commitment to work cooperatively and to try to get something accomplished. In this case, McLendon-Chisholm and Terrell are committing to try to make McLendon-Chisholm a water retailer by purchasing water at wholesale rates from the city of Terrell. So this MOU, or any MOU for that matter, typically anticipates a binding contract will happen in the future, with deal points often expressed in the MOU. I don't know where that one was.
It's Ryan.
This particular MOU anticipates agreements on things like construction, water sales, boundary adjustments, and fire service. It is important to have such understandings going into, a big undertaking of this kind, so that both city councils, McLendon-Chisholm and Terrell, will feel comfortable moving forward, whether it's utilizing resources, making plans, negotiating, and coming into contact with those third parties like North Texas Municipal Water District. So there's going to be lots of talks and discussions. So this is just the beginning point. It's kind of the jumping off point. One catalyst for this agreement is the proposed Mann development. That has not come before this council. The Mann property is located at the southern edge of McLendon-Chisholm, and it extends into Kaufman County. The proposed development is in the ETJ. The city approved a development agreement with the Mann property owners back in 2007, long before any of us were here. That agreement will expire in January of 2022. Ms. Mann has wanted to develop this property all these years, but the lack of water has stalled the project, and she's been unable to get that going off the ground. The city of McLendon-Chisholm, well before my time with the city or anyone else here for that matter today, they approved several development agreements over a period of time. Some developments like Sonoma Verde materialized and happened. Others did not. Nearly every one of these agreements had some sort of an intention mentioned within that agreement that McLendon-Chisholm was supposed to be or intended to be at some point when it's able a water provider. It just hasn't happened to date. So one of these agreements included the Mann development. The Mann development, just a brief history of that, it's 1,100 acres, single-family and mixed-use development. Without a water source, the Mann development, that development agreement will just expire and go away. If that happens, we've lost the opportunity to regulate the land use, and we'll lose that opportunity to reap any of the benefits that are part of that development agreement, and there are many. The Mann property will eventually get their water from someone, whether it's McLendon-Chisholm or Terrell or another source, but we would lose out on that opportunity to be a water retail provider. Not just this Mann development, but other ETJ properties and territory that's outside of our ETJ but close. I'm not saying anyone in particular making any commitments on anyone's behalf, but High Point and Blue Bonnet and some of those areas that are just outside of our ETJ area, there's potential there to serve those properties as well. So in the long run, this memorandum of understanding between the two cities, Terrell and McLendon-Chisholm, it is kind of a jumping off point where we can consider and fully explore the opportunity to bring water from the direction of the city of Terrell up through the Brushy Creek corridor and to serve parts of McLendon-Chisholm in the city and or the ETJ. So that's what this is about today. So by having this opportunity to perhaps be a water provider, we're allowing that, developments such as the Mann property and others. There's potential here for those properties to even voluntarily annex. I'm not committing anybody, but there's a potential here and maybe an incentive for some of these communities to voluntarily annex into the city eventually. The more homes you have, the more you spread the burden of services and the price for services, and the lower, I think we could keep our taxes overall. So if we can spread those burdens out. As you're aware of, we've got expanding public services, fire department most recently, eventually law enforcement. I'm not saying we'll have a police department, but on some level we're going to have law enforcement services, whether it be through a contract or we provide them. So the more we can spread that burden, the better. So this is just an opportunity for us to provide increased service levels And it may be our only opportunity in looking at the map and looking at all the service providers. Maybe our one shot at becoming a water provider is coming from this direction. So I'm just going to summarize real quick some of the main points of this agreement. It is not a long agreement. It just kind of goes over some of the highlights and some of the things that Terrell and McLendon-Chisholm will be working together to achieve over the next little bit if council chooses to approve this. So Terrell will work, these are the deal points in here. Terrell will work to acquire the right to sell water at wholesale rates to McLendon-Chisholm, acquire easements and design, construct, and operate infrastructure needed to serve McLendon-Chisholm's wholesale water needs. McLendon-Chisholm will work to acquire any utility CCNs, those are the certificates of convenience and necessity that allow someone to serve water to a particular area that might be required, and construct infrastructure necessary to accept water purchased from Terrell and to serve its own retail water customers. McLendon-Chisholm will resell water at retail rates within its corporate limits and in other parts of its ETJ in which it has interests. The city will finalize an ETJ agreement under which city's future boundaries will generally follow the Terrell ISD and Rockwell ISD boundaries, the county line area south of here. However, the man development would remain in the McLendon-Chisholm's ETJ. So at some point we would end up talking about just sort of cleaning up the boundary lines a little bit so it makes sense for both cities. And the last one here, Terrell will provide interim funding in exchange for McLendon-Chisholm providing certain fire services. So I've talked to Terrell, and they're very aware that we were under a SAFER grant and that we're in the last year of that grant and it will be falling off. If they have development coming in this direction, they will actually need some fire service, and they're willing to work with us on perhaps providing some funding or some sort of in-kind type of payment exchange that we'd have to work that out in the future, but to help us provide the services that we need and that they need. So my recommendation, you've got the MOU, the proposed MOU in your packet. My recommendation at this time as your city administrator is this is a long time coming, and it's a strong recommendation for approval. I do have John Godwin, who's the management consultant for the city of Terrell, that's been talking about this for quite some time. He's here if you have questions for him, or I can try to answer your questions. But my recommendation would be for approval. And with that, I'll turn it back over to council for consideration.
Any questions?
Do we want to do questions or first?
We can go with the motion and then go with the second and then go with discussion and questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the MOU between the City of McLendon-Chisholm and Terrell and Ruth.
Yes, on a second. Second. Got a motion and a second. All right, now we're open for discussion.
Okay, so once we get this MOU going, then what's the next step? The two cities work together and come up with the game plan and present it to council, or how's that work?
John, could you approach the podium there?
Push the button on there.
Which one?
Either one. Whichever one that was.
Two things basically up front. One is that once the agreement's in place, and let me just insert that I just met with our city council a while ago in a work session. They're on board informally, as you guys were a week and a half ago. It's on our agenda for September 1st, next Tuesday, to approve as well, and then have the mayor execute. But going backwards, two things. One is once we have the agreement in place, that kind of gives us a green light to spend money. And what we'll spend money on, begin spending money on, is engineering. We've met with engineers already, and we're doing engineering design in other places, but this will give us the wherewithal to spend money on engineering, because we're going to have to figure out how it's going to get here. We'll also have to spend money on lawyers and engineers and dealing with some of the water districts. And then the second part of that is we'll start at least beginning to flesh out future agreements, because this MOU means that we're going to have a contract for water. It means we're going to have a contract for fire. We'll have to have a contract or an agreement for the ETJ. So two things at one time, hopefully.
Okay, and so it's just in our, so you're going to work to acquire the right to sell the water. You're going to work to get the easements, and you're going to work the infrastructure aspects. And then it's our responsibility to work with to determine what CCNs have to be required.
Correct.
Okay?
We'll also need to provide John and his team some good data. So I think they're incurring most of the cost up front, but we will need to provide them at least some good, solid estimates. And I think we've decided we can do that without a lot of our engineering costs, that we can look at our map and our potential housing developments, and we can get them some good numbers. So they're going to be encouraging the bulk of the cost for this up front. Any other significant costs, I would come back to council for.
And then, Mr. Hall, have you had a chance to review this?
I did, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you explain what CCN is again? It's certificates.
Convenience and necessity. That's basically your right that you're given by the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, PUC, Utilities Commission, to sell water in a particular geographic area. And so, for example, High Point Special Utility District, they have CCNs to serve a large, kind of a triangular shaped piece of property. You can't just start selling water anywhere you want, because rural areas are typically divided up by CCNs. Cities can operate within their own city limits typically, just because they're a city, but you can't operate outside it unless you have a CCN. So in this case, we could run water all the way up here to your city if you were just going to serve your city. That's probably not practical because of the expense of building such a long line. So us or you or both of us are going to have to acquire some portion of CCNs, probably, from some of these other districts. There's districts and corporations both that supply water. There's in your area as well as in our area. And then there's hybrids of that too, but that's how that works. Is basically the state just kind of divides up the state, and you have a right, an exclusive right to serve water or wastewater within your CCN.
And Carol gets their water from the North Texas Water District.
We do. So, like for example, you're getting water. Chances are you're getting, depending on where you live, you're getting water from us anyway. It's just going to go in through somewhere else. It's going to go through somebody else first. The supply district that's over here on the northeast side of town, they get water from us in Rockwall. High Point gets water from us and Forney, but we all get it from North Texas up in Wyoming.
Any other questions?
There are actually 3 water supply corporations that are serving this area. So RCH and High Point, and actually Blackland has a little piece of it as well.
And I'm glad Mr. Dodler mentioned it's an exclusive right to deal with. That's a very important aspect, I think, of the CCN, exclusive right to deal with water and or sewer inside of that area. And as Lisa mentioned, there are other 3. So the thing about an MOU, we worked through it. I added some things, that are recommended, and it's not binding. I don't think it hurts to talk. MOUs are kind of good because if you do have a contract, people for the most part aren't going to walk into them with 2 completely different ideas, and you're like way off. Everybody's way off northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere in terms of the contract. You got to get an idea of who's going to have what responsibility, and we know that the CCNs with like what Lisa mentioned, all the ones that we have, that's going to be something that we'll have to work through. So it would be helpful if we could get, it's always good when you can control your own water. So if we could get the CCN for our area, I don't really see, from a legal standpoint, because it's not legally binding, we don't really lose anything by talking about it. And at least now you have an idea of what we're expecting from them, and they have an idea of what they can expect from us. So.
If there's no further questions, thank you. Thanks, sir. All right, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Show that unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. All right, moving on. 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5. There are going to be some questions on each of those with the city attorney. So at this point in time, it is now 6:56. We're going to move to executive session. 7:53, we're back from executive session. Um, 8.1.
Heard at your places about the Extreme Green event?
Yeah.
Kind of threw this around, and we can change this up, but I went ahead and just
Which is council member report. I'll do one real quick and give you a minute to get that together. Saturday from 8 o'clock until noon. There's document shredding. anything else being done on the agenda?